So the astrology of the week of 29 November 2021 through 5 December 2021 brings us this final eclipse in this season, this eclipse season. Also the final eclipse, a solar eclipse in Sagittarius of an 18-month cycle of eclipses. And the thing about it is that this is, kind of an ending of some cycles, but there still is very strong Mars in the sky. That Mars is still square Saturn by sign. And I think the theme of this week that I've tapped into is one of staying strong and staying tough amidst what is kind of a rising chaos all around us. And so let's dig into the charts, let's dig into the astrology this week. My name is S.J. Anderson. Welcome to my channel. I make videos about the astrology every week, and it's my great pleasure to do so. Occasionally there's some other videos related to astrology, tarot, but this is my weekly astrology offering, so I'm glad you're here, I'm glad you found this channel. It's an intense moment in time if we're going to talk a little bit about an introduction. And what I like to do is have this introduction, and then we'll go into several things, 4 things. One, I'll talk about planets, their aspects with each other, their ingresses into the signs, their retrogrades, stations, or direct stations. Then I'll talk about the moon, the second thing, and its movement, the great moon, which is the closest thing to us, the closest body to us. We're so sensitive to it. Then I'm going to talk about 2 charts. There'll be 2 charts I've selected that I think are most important to discuss, at least from my opinion, for this week to understand the astrology. Then finally I'll pull a cartomancy tarot card to just add another level of symbolism. So that's what you're going to get from this video. And by way of an introduction, I just think we have to note here that we're in this land of eclipses, but importantly, what I was speaking to earlier, the cycles that are coming to a close. And often at the end of a cycle, it can sometimes be the time when it's most potent in a way, because it's had time to percolate and generate power. And then as it's especially tasked with letting go of power, that can sometimes be an unstable time, or the time when all the pieces fit together, all of the meaning that has been building somehow now makes sense because of this final moment of an energy. And what we get this week is this, like I said, the final eclipse, the solar eclipse in Sagittarius. Very, very powerful eclipse, by the way. I was shocked, actually. I'm just gonna say this right now. I was preparing this talk, and I'm just kind of blown away, frankly, by some of the symbolic references that the astrology this week is calling to our mind, against the backdrop of what we saw last week, which is some real tough turns in terms of the collective narrative. This, if you recall last week, I talked about that Leo moon and the T-square, the fixed T-square being some difficult energy over Thanksgiving, where we had this announcement that the health crisis, global health crisis, has now taken on a big serious turn, and we're seeing a lot of kind of difficult energy emerge. And then, so against that backdrop, in the middle of eclipse season, again, eclipses, faded beginnings and endings, we've captured that with, unfortunately, this turn of maybe intensity and fear in the collective during this eclipse season. But the symbols this week, just wait and see, because they're very potent along the lines of this kind of collective narrative that we're grappling with now. And again, it's the final moment of this Sagittarius cycle. It's also the final moment of eclipse season itself. So we now can settle in after these eclipses for another 6 months. We have an April and May eclipse in 2022 that will be the next eclipse season. And so there's some settling into kind of post-eclipse newness, but it's the end of the Sagittarius eclipse cycle. Now, the North Node does not enter Taurus until January, and then Jupiter also moves into Pisces at the end of December. So it's not like we're completely out of the waters and into some new waters yet. There's a few other transits that need to transpire in January before we're really feeling maybe done with this eclipse series, and we're fully activated in that new axis of Taurus Scorpio. But the last experience of an eclipse season here is this week. So what else do I want to say before I launch in here in terms of the introduction? I think that's pretty much it. Just hold on to your hats, basically, because I think the collective is, as this final period of Jupiter and Saturn being co-present, I've been talking about this for months and months, even years. I think we're going to see the final kind of move and push and turn of what's been set up here and what we've kind of entered into collectively. Remember, Jupiter and Saturn, 20-year cycles, and they initiate things that then define the next 20 years. And I've been thinking about this often, like 1980 to 2000. That was a kind of period where you had the Cold War end and those transitions into that post-Cold War period. And all of the technology that was developing and all of the cultural kind of aspects that can be encapsulated in that 20-year zone. Then you have the 2000s to 2020, and we have a clear encapsulation of time with the war on terror, to use that phrase that was given to us. That period kind of culminated and came to an end in 2020 when we have this whole new kind of moment that we're in with a whole new set of narratives. So that's just been initiated and set up as Jupiter begins to now leave its co-presence. This happens in the end of 2021 in December. I think we're now going to filter in, start really expanding, and this initial burst of kind of change will expand and now grow and morph into what this next 20-year cycle is going to be about. I think there's a lot of continuity in 2022 with 2021. That's kind of the introduction here. Let me shift now. Let's go. Let's jump into the planets this week and the transits and see what these planets are doing. Well, the big story is that we're in a Mercury cazimi, in a Mercury heart of the sun currently. I use the ancient definition, the Hellenistic definition. If Mercury and the sun are within a degree, then they're blending in an auspicious way for Mercury. And I think for the sun too, the sun gets to kind of intertwine with the power of Mercury and kind of purify it, but the sun can be influenced by it, and we're in that now as I record this video on Sunday. But that perfects exactly Monday morning, 5:39 a.m. here in Central Europe, so right into the week. You might be watching this after that perfection happened. But it stays within a degree, Mercury does, until Wednesday, 1 a.m. here in Central Europe, roughly. And that would put, so you can still enjoy this early tone of the week with Mercury and the sun blending auspiciously. I have here, we can have kind of internal spiritual realization that we can, use, maybe insight that will emerge. That's what I think about with Mercury and Jupiter. So this is Sagittarius, Mercury in Sagittarius with the sun, that this does take on even a more of a spiritual tonality. Jupiter's signification, one of its significations is the wisdom and the kind of priest class and the religious philosophy and these higher minded ideas that come from out of wisdom, thought, traditions, or the study of kind of truth. It's more of the higher level epiphany style breakthroughs we can have. And so that Mercury is there in Sagittarius and then getting purified, it might be that we can actually at this point have a nice engagement with some of maybe the detailed studies that we're doing that can lead to that epiphany style realization. So maybe you're reading a spiritual book and you just read that one sentence and somehow it just opens you, or you can sit with that insight. And breakthrough here is possible. Now the thing about it is this all happens very close to the South Node. Those conjunctions happened last week, but they're still close to the South Node within an orb, modern astrologers might say. And the South Node is also a spiritualizing point, and so and that's a little rougher of an energy. It's a kind of a stripping away. And so, combining this all together, my delineation is just, these kind of internal spiritual realizations that may emerge early in the week. And then we shift out here into these trines. First Mercury, sextile. First Mercury sextile Saturn, and then the sun will sextile Saturn in order. This comes on Wednesday. The sextile with Mercury and Saturn perfects at 8 in the morning, and then one day later, almost actually 16 hours later, so just as we turn into Thursday here in Central Europe, December 1st, let me just come back to that. It's Tuesday that Mercury will sextile Saturn at 8 in the morning on Tuesday, and then so while the cazimi is still, or the in the heart of the sun moment is still here, And then you have early in the morning on Wednesday, just after we turn into Wednesday here in Central Europe, 14 minutes after the clock turns, the sun will sextile Saturn. And so I'm just thinking here about how useful it is to have these sextiles to Saturn, especially in a time when we're still grappling. I've been thinking about this so much the last couple of days because I'm thinking about 2022's astrology, even into 2023, just how magnificently, the upheaval that we experienced has been, how magnificent it's been, and how magnificently, the experience of it all has kind of felt maybe. It's radical changes in the reality. Once in a few generation upheaval in terms of the social order, the nature of how countries interact with each other. We're having an epic moment. And anytime I think about Saturn still in Aquarius, the sign it's been in during all of this, because Saturn entered Aquarius March 2020, for the first time, and now it's still here. When we get the Sun and Mercury sextiling this Saturn, it just makes me think about thinking about everything we've just gone through in a way, from a positive angle. How has this newness, has this upheaval served you? What has been open for you? I talk to people all the time, and so often I hear, that's when this thing changed, and the work from home turned my whole perception about what was possible in my life around, and now I have a whole new relationship to how I respect myself vis-a-vis the workplace because of everything that this moment necessitated. So there's support here. All this upheaval it's difficult. It's certainly difficult for many, but it can be an opportunity, a great opportunity, and it's here. So we need to start accepting, in my view, me included, that this is the 20 years we've just entered into. The digitization, the separation, the kind of restriction that will come in waves. This is all here to stay, unfortunately, for a while. And Andre Barbeau, I'll just throw it in here. I have a whole video on this. When will the crisis end? But his take is that it's 2026, 2025, 2026. So just get comfortable with these new structures, these new Saturnine structures, because they're going to be here. And this week, this moment, this sextile, Tuesday, Wednesday, with the Cazimi happening right around the same time, because the Sun perfects its sextile right as that Cazimi is about to conclude, actually. You are going to have an ability to to maybe think about some of these breakthroughs, spiritual, etc., about this new realm we're in for your life, and for how you can kind of lean into it and even embrace it and thrive within it. Sometimes when we get shocked, it takes a while. You see in the movies, a guy gets an explosion, then it takes a moment, like Bond, he kind of wakes up, and then pretty soon you snap up, and then you're back into action against what maybe has been experienced as a shock. So this is, I think, a time to start thinking about getting back into action. The Sun, the consciousness, Mercury, the details, maybe planning energy. Here in Sagittarius, epiphany or big picture, movement, right? Sagittarius is a sign of movement. And so this is how I see the early week. And again, I have to say, all of this is in the backdrop of an eclipse season. And that's what makes eclipse seasons, so intense sometimes. There can be just a lot of activity, a lot of shift and change. I always recommend, this is what I always say, it's turn down your life. Try to just get spiritual. Listen to the mantras, pray and meditate. I've been doing some of that. It's been good. But, and then I also always say, but sometimes during eclipse season, life just gets so intense in terms of all the activity that's the kind of push and pull of the eclipse season. It's fated beginnings and endings that can require a lot of our attention. So to me, this feels like a week where there probably is some of that intensity happening. But as much as you can, try to spiritualize. And this is my advice all the time for everyone. Meditation practice has been so important in my life for my own health, of all mental and physical, that I really do recommend it. Some type of contemplative work, if you can, if you're able. So, all right, and that can even be walking. Anything. We all have an awareness. So, meditation is just about where do you put your attention? And so you can do it when you do any activity, actually. Okay, so this is the early part of the week, and then we shift. So the first is Wednesday, Thursday the 2nd, Friday the 3rd, and then this Saturday solar eclipse. This is what everything is waning and waning. The waning moon cycle, we're resting and resting, and then boom, the eclipse is going to come. And all I have here is the final, it concludes the cycle. I've already talked all about that. I'm going to wait here to dive into the eclipse because it's the one of the two charts I will be going very, very deep into. But when we look at it in the flow of the aspects this week, I think we can just think about these contemplative, spiritual epiphanies around the benefits maybe of this new reality that we're in, that maybe that can settle into the experience of the eclipse, and even just opening to the mystery and awe of the physical reality we're in. I don't believe that it's purely physical, right? Astrology by its nature is not a practice of scientific materialism, it's a practice of spirituality, and meaning the realms that aren't seen, that aren't physical. So that's my short definition of spirituality. It's things that we can't see, that are operative, that we can then engage with, and that aren't tangible in a sense. And so we are dealing with spiritual times, with eclipses, with the nodes. They themselves kind of expose the unseen architecture. 5 years in a row, you're going along, and then boom, you hit a solar eclipse, and you see in the middle of the day the light goes out. That does something. That makes us wonder what the hell is going on that I can't see, that I haven't understood. These are the kind of epiphanies that can come from an eclipse season. It's the knowledge, the truth that can emerge. And there's some real high profile trials right now. I won't say the names because they can be maybe triggering, but look into some of these trials that are exposing kind of the nasty underbelly of the structure of society, let's just say that. That's happening and starting now during, I think, Monday. So this is the kind of vibe we get with eclipse season. Okay, so let me just shift now. Let's go to what the moon's doing. The moon here is waning. Like I said, it's waning into this eclipse. But it's interesting this week because the moon in every sign that it's in has some support from its ruler, being dignified in some ways. And so we have here, let's just walk through it. It's usually a rough part of the sky, Scorpio and then Capricorn, the sign of the moon's fall and exile, and the Via Combusta, right, Libra and Scorpio. So this has a whole edge to it usually. And then we have the South Node in Sagittarius, so that's been having for the last 18 months the rough edge when the moon hits Sagittarius. But look at this, we've got the moon in Virgo during the Mercury Cazimi, Mercury in the heart of the sun. That is very nice to have the ruler being purified there and supported by the sun. That can help the moon, which otherwise would have Mercury being in its sign of exile, opposite Gemini and Sagittarius. We have Venus in Capricorn in its own terms. So when the moon comes into Libra, here on Monday at about 10 in the morning in Central Europe, the moon hits Libra. You got this Venus in its own terms in Capricorn. This has been maybe one of the sweeter Venuses over the last few days since this hit, and will be here into the first part of this week. Venus in Capricorn, longevity and pleasure and love. It's like the painting that sits in your living room or in your room for a decade, and you get to know that painting, and there's intimacy that is only available with longevity. Talked all about that before, but that's kind of the sweetness here of this Venus in Capricorn. And it's strong, it will rule moon. It's a lovely Libra moon transit this week. Then we go to the Scorpio moon. Well, the moon is with Mars, strong, protecting the moon. So it's nice to always be with the ruler of the sign and traveling together, because that ruler can, you can just basically trust their powers in their own sign, and they feed and support you. It's kind of like, the guest host, going back to Firmicus Maternus. It's the ancient analogy of the guest and the host. The host is the ruler, the guest is any planet transiting through the sign. And so to be with the host, anything you need. If you've ever had a really nice host, it's like, what do you need? Oh, here's this. Here, message me if you need something. Or if they're really nice, like they have, maybe just the resources to have all kinds of, butlers and things that really take care of you. But the idea is that you're catering to a guest, and that's what's key. So we have here, let's see here, where are we at? So we're at the Scorpio moon with Mars very strong, and then the moon comes into Sagittarius, sextile Jupiter. That's been a nice support the whole of 2021 to have, or a lot of 2021, you have the sextile And then the parts of 2021 where Jupiter was in Pisces, that was also nice for the Sagittarius moon. Jupiter is what we call receiving the moon. It can communicate. And I like what Jupiter's doing right now. It's moving towards Pisces, and we can feel that coming. I just saw a tweet, Blaze Max, astrologer Blaze Max, 30 days. I guess we're right now 30 days until Jupiter enters Pisces. So that's coming. And it's coming, and we can feel it. I can feel the Jupiter moving, ruling this eclipse, now ruling this moon. So that's nice to have the sextile from Jupiter. And then when in Capricorn, we have the strong Saturn. And so there is just a layer of support here for the moon during this waning cycle. I do think the malefic edge, for example, of a Scorpio or Capricorn moon in this case, or a moon with the South Node in Sagittarius, it's still potent, it's still present. But maybe there's something like just understanding there's a support of the greater interconnection of the chart in this case, or of life, where we have these underlying supports that will ultimately, that we can default to ultimately. So I say struggle for a purpose here. Sometimes with malefic energy, it's good to just know, okay, there's something happening that ultimately this will be about, or this is for a purpose, for a reason. Struggle's great if you have a purpose. Lifting weights, I know I want to stay strong, and that can be a struggle, and then the body gets strong and healthy. Just one example there. But all kinds of struggles. Students, I remember my student days. God, school was so hard. I hated school. It was just so brutal on the mental health for me, because it's like you have all these deadlines, and I'm just not good with deadlines often, and I hate working at right under the gun. I just lose it mentally. I've been known to do that. Sometimes just say, I'm not going to do it, or fuck it, I'll take the F, rather than put myself under that pressure. And I think but I know a lot of students out there that were really good students. They would just take on that pressure, and they could do it well, but they knew their eye was on that A, or their career goals. So it's just another example. I think checking in on where you're going is how I might phrase that. Where are you going? As you go through a difficult week this week, where are you going? And that can sometimes be, the answer to that is, I don't know. Maybe with that Mercury in Sagittarius, it's like, I don't know where I'm going. And then that's the answer, though. That's empowering, right? There's a great book by Pema Chodron, the Tibetan Buddhist nun, and it's called Going Nowhere, Being Nobody. Actually, that's not by Pema Chodron. She's got a book about when things fall apart, the Pema Chodron book that I really like. And that's perfect for a malefic, moon as well. When things just are kind of falling apart, when the comfort of the moon and the body has to filter through, these other coldness or harsh activity, Saturn and Mars. That's a good book to adhere. But there's a book called Being Nowhere, Being Nobody, Going Nowhere. Being Nobody, Going... I'm just going to get it up. I've made the reference. I now have to get it up because I'm in the middle of the talk here. This is by someone named Aya Kemma, a Buddhist. When I was deeper in my Buddhist studies in the last decade, this book was really popular. I remember reading it and thinking, Aya Kemma, just the concept here of not having to have an identity, not being so held to the identity, as a way to let go of struggles as they come. Because so much of the times the struggle can be about what we think we want or know, and if we just say, I'm free to be nobody and go nowhere, it can really be a release. I think about that Beatles song, Nowhere Man. The Beatles in the news this week, right? So cool. They played Ed Sullivan at a time when you had Saturn in Aquarius and Jupiter in Aries, but they were forming all around this last Saturn-Jupiter cycle that matches the one we're going through now. So to see the Let It Be film be released, it just matches that astrology, that echo with the Saturn-Jupiter cycle. So, but just to come back, Nowhere Man, that John Lennon song, I think it can be part of, like I say, struggle for a purpose, but sometimes that can just be, I'm just going to let go, and I'm just going to be nothing and be real malleable moment to moment. Now, I do think it's good to just have a purpose, like from the flow of a day. Like, I'm going to do a shower, I'm going to get my laundry, maybe make some food. Sometimes these little steps can be grounding. But sometimes maybe it's just, F it all. I'm just going to just do nothing and just literally be floating on water. That can maybe be supportive as well here. So I don't even know how I wasn't going to talk about that, but that's the beauty of doing a talk like this that is more free flowing, is it things like this can come out. And I actually do think the idea of being nobody and going nowhere, nowhere man, is so apropos for a Sagittarius solar eclipse. Consciousness, and I'm going to say this later, but I'll just give you a preview here. You know, the idea of an eclipse being the sun, which is the consciousness, being obscured. And there can be a sense of where am I, who am I, what am I, that comes in an eclipse season. That's what they're here for, to dislodge. That's why people say they're maybe malefic, because you're going to dislodge the normal flow of reality and raise these deeper questions that sometimes can be greatly destabilizing, but when they're answered and when they're grappled with, can really root and provide depth of meaning to the life. So that's the opportunity of an eclipse season, particularly in Sagittarius, particularly with the South Node, that great spiritual point. So this is the week. This is the week. Let's move now to my charts of the week. The first one is my transit of the week. You can probably guess it's this Libra moon, just from how I talked about it earlier. God, this Libra moon is awesome. Mars doesn't see the moon, is an aversion. Saturn makes a trine. The nodes are making a sextile. This moon is safe from those major destabilizing points that we examined from the ancient system. And the reason why I love it is that Venus is in its terms in Capricorn. So it was everything I described earlier about how we can, you know, really deepen with the kind of old beauty or the longevity. I watched a talk on not Lucian Freud, the artist Francis Bacon, who was friends with Lucian Freud. And it was just getting into the world, hearing someone talk about this artist and his paintings and examining that work. That was how this transit is manifested for me, just hearing that, because it's old things, right? He's an older artist from the 20th century, and it's painting Venus, the sweet mixing, the mixing of colors, as Vidius Valens would say, Venus signifies. So, and I felt greatly inspired by learning more about Francis Bacon's life as a painter. And this is the kind of stuff that, you know, having just Venus in its terms, it can do. It can empower ancient art, you know, the depth and longevity of relationship, maybe with people in your life that are older. You know, check up on your older friends. Anytime I think about Capricorn, I think about old folks. And in our society, we can sometimes toss, you know, people away that have aged or that are aging, but those are some of the most wise people that exist. I mean, they've seen it all, they've been through so much. I think we need to, this is kind of a love your elders, or at least relate with your elders transit. Who in your life can you call that's older, that maybe misses you and loves you, and that they're wondering where you are? Give them a call this week. So I'm gonna do that. I gotta call my aunt. Okay, so let's come back here. This is why I love the rulers. The moon is safe, and then the ruler of the moon is here in good condition in its own Egyptian terms in Capricorn, and a sign where Venus also has day triplicity rulership. So these are the two fundamental principles for me for any electional work, actually, whether it's a specific election or whether it's just finding good energy like I do in these videos. Is the moon, is it safe? And is it well situated? And then the ruler of the moon. That's the 1-2. Those always have to be primary concerns in my view. Everything else is secondary. Moon and the ruler of the moon. Okay, let's come back here. Venus, let's see here. I also want to mention Venus in Capricorn. It's getting ready to station at the end of December. And so we're well in our Venus and Capricorn story. You may want to think about everything I just said about relationships with old things or older folks, but even in just your relationship life in general, how is it going? You know, do you feel supported by the connections that you're making or the people you're engaged with on a regular basis? What is emergent now? What is extant? What is the context in which you're swimming at this time? Because when that Venus moves backwards, there could be shifts happening, you know, around what you've already been experiencing. And of course could be unexpected things. I remember this, I'll tell you this one Venus RX story. This is before I was an astrologer, but I went and looked back the dates on this when I became an astrologer. The day of Venus's retrograde station, I believe I think it was in Scorpio. I could be wrong, but I think it was in October 2010. One of my ex-girlfriends messaged me out of the blue. It had been a few years since we talked, and then when I later learned about Venus, and I had like let go and kind of no contact and just let her go with love, you know, and then I get this message right on the retrograde station of Venus, And I had heard, before I went back, I had heard astrologers talking about Venus retrograde, past loves coming back, making contact. So that's all possible too, as just the symbology or the symbolism of Venus retrograde. All right, so let's come back here. Let me flow back, see where I'm going here. But yeah, there's a part of this Libra moon where we're maybe able to feel or lean into or open up to this Venus and Capricorn moment and prepare for the retrograde, or try to understand a little bit of what this retrograde may be about. It's basically all of January 2022, Venus is retrograde. End of December, end of January are the stations. And then I have here, if you can get in the chart, so like the one I'm able to get where I am, you've got the moon with Spica and Arcturus, two of the most auspicious Behenian fixed stars. They represent, a genius and the fecundity of life. That's Spica, the sheaf of wheat in the Virgin's hand. And then Arcturus is the herdsman. It's kind of a tougher star. But this, you can get the moon with them if you want near that. This is really, I mentioned this here, I probably shouldn't have even done it because it's so location dependent. So if you're in Europe, you might be able to capture that. And then I just want to see trine Jupiter here, and it's square Venus. This moon is enclosed between Venus and Jupiter. That's the powerful thing about this moon in the later degrees. It's a benefic enclosure as well, on top of everything else I already mentioned. And it's really cool and a really amazing moon. I love it, I love it, I love it. It happens here in eclipse season, so there's this kind of sifting through the strange land between eclipses vibe going on for it all too. I don't know if I would use it for an election. Maybe if you have to act, you can try to use this for something. But even if you're not going to do a specific election for a moment of time, sometimes you can just meditate and feel the energy during that passing moment. If it's like a pretty good election, but maybe not good enough to do something fully. I do that a lot. And here, I just wanted to, as I always do, as you know, I look at the lunar mansion. Lunar mansion 16, Al-Zubana. This is that lunar mansion where the moon will be enclosed here. Good for trade, business, wealth, prosperity. Not good for love, relationships, traveling, healing, gardening. The essence is wealth and prosperity, but not love. I'm reading off of the lunarium.co.uk summary. Love this site, my favorite site for lunar mansions. But here's the idea of Libra as an energy that's less inclined for love and the kind of physical warm side of Venus. And it's more inclined for the kind of the trade and business side, which are relationship activities. Business is all about relationships, but it's not about maybe the nighttime style Venus, which is when we come back into the bedroom and have that style of relationship, right? This is how we have relationships out in the world, to effectuate, in this case, business and trade. And this is the part of Saturn and Mercury ruling Libra by triplicity. Saturn is certainly a planet of business in the sense that we're trying to kind of rise up in the world and gain resources. Mercury is certainly trading in business as well. So I think that's something to note here as you're going to feel out this energy here on Wednesday. Right after the Cazimi is just separating, and right after the sextiles between the Sun and Mercury perfect with Saturn, now we get this Libra moon and this benefic enclosure. Maybe there's something here if you're having to do business or having to get out in the world, like we're going to be working this week, a lot of us, and we have to still be out there. Maybe there's something with business that you can employ or deepen into here on Tuesday, Wednesday during this enclosure. It's right here about, as Tuesday flows into Wednesday in Central Europe is when this enclosure is happening. Just look for when Venus separates, the moon separates from Venus, and then when the moon perfects the trine to Jupiter. In between those two events is this enclosure. Okay, so that's the transit of the week. The next chart, of course, is the solar eclipse. And this is where, when I looked at, so that Libra moon's powerful, and I saw that earlier, I was like, damn, what a week. This is an awesome week of astrology, just to have a moon like that. It's rare to have like a moon that's safe from Saturn and Mars in the nodes and enclosed by the benefics. It's actually quite rare, and with a ruler that's positive in its own. It has dignity, term and triplicity dignity, as Venus does now. So that's kind of a rare, auspicious chart. The only thing I would say is that the eclipse season may, destabilize it somewhat. But let's shift. So that I saw that, but then this is where this whole week took on like a heaviness for me when I was diving into this Sun chart of the solar eclipse. And let's just do it. Let's just dive in. So the eclipse of the Sun is symbolically a removal of foundation. That's what I was saying earlier. We obscure our consciousness. The center of all of the human reality is the ability to perceive, awareness, right? That gets blocked just symbolically in the sky. And so there's a consciousness being obscured or blocked. And so that's just the first thing. The second thing I want to say is that the ruler, Jupiter, it's nice that there is a sign-based sextile from Jupiter. Very, very nice to see in this chart. And then the other ruler, the Egyptian terms ruler, is Venus. Venus is averse to the eclipse. So there's kind of some mixed support here in terms of just the aspect that this eclipse will make to its rulers. But that Jupiter sign-based trine is lovely. Let me see here. Jupiter is also in this chart making a pretty close square, applying square to Mars. And this is the story that where this chart takes a turn in a way. Mars is very powerful in Scorpio, right? But Mars is enclosed between Jupiter and Venus. Mars has a benefic enclosure during this eclipse chart. And this is the power and the force of maybe, I don't want to say violence, but it's the kind of violence maybe that we need at times to kind of jostle free from events that are around us. I mean, Mars is our willingness and ability to act, sometimes quickly, sometimes where we destroy things as we're acting, but that destruction is necessitated by the reasons for action. And so this very dignified Mars, it could be that is some of what is going on, and I think it certainly is collectively. And so this is kind of the idea of acting within this moment of fated beginnings and endings. There may be, a need to do things or act out of a situation or a set of circumstances that are emerging here, maybe against our better judgment, but we're forced into the action here. I love this Mars and its benefic enclosure. Now, the other thing about it I want to point out here is that the Sun and Moon are meeting in the decan of the Moon in Sagittarius. And so the Moon has this decanic dignity. And I don't really use the decans quite as often, but I do like to use them symbolically, especially when a planet is in its own decan and has that dignity. It can open up maybe a channel into some other symbols to help us understand. And so anytime I look at decans, I go right to tarot, because these tarot cards are actually quite in line with the themes and symbols of the decans. I mean, the creators of these decks, in particular the Crowley deck here you see, they have the decanic associations on the deck. So they knew about the decans and were working with them as they created the deck. My deck has this the same. It's all about the decans. And then we have the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. But you can look here, and one thing I want to note before we look at the cards. So Venus does not perfect the sextile with Mars. Venus it's now actually separating. It was applying until I think that 2 days ago, and now it's slowly separating because Venus is slowing down and Mars is continuing at the speed it's at. And so it doesn't perfect. In a way, that might weaken a little bit the benefic enclosure to a certain extent, because it's never going to meet up with Venus. But it's still there, it's still present, maybe just a different style of a benefic enclosure. But that reformation to me feels this theme that I've been describing at the beginning of effort, of staying strong. It's like knowing there's some sweetness and then that's going to get taken away. And so we have to stay strong even though the world has gone mad. And that's why I was so interested in this, because of the news from last week. It looks like there's chaos returning to the reality. We're having another leg of this sort of chaotic upheaval. And to me, this reformation is one part of that it's kind of a sweetness that never comes. But the second part of it are these tarot cards, the symbols of this eclipse. Look at this. Rider-Waite-Smith, so Pamela Coleman Smith draws a guy with a bandage, and he's kind of a warrior that's bandaged but now protected, right? There's a wall he's behind. Crowley named the card Strength, and it's the power of the kind of passion and force of the fire sign. But then this sort of protection here, this sort of home protection that can come, maybe strength in the body, digging deep to find that inner strength. I've called the card Concentration, the Moon in Sagittarius. I think it has to do more with the power, the inner wellspring of when push comes to shove. Sometimes we have to dig deep and find our fortitude. And so that's a theme of this week. As the world's going mad, it's like, hang on, find your fortitude, and just know there may be some more toughness that's required. These are auspicious cards, actually. This is an auspicious card. I like this card. Now, there's a whole nother layer to this, which is when you look at the fixed star. This is where it gets really kind of strange to me, because Alwade is the fixed star that the moon will be closely conjoined in the sun during this eclipse, 7 degree minutes away. This is the eye of the dragon, Draco, in the Draco constellation. And when you read the mythology of Draco, it's all about like sacrificing a serpent, or a serpent is killed after the deluge, the python gets killed. But there's this sense of a death or a sacrifice around a dragon energy. But what interested me more than that was when you pull up, so this comes from the book by Allen, Star Names. It's a 19th century text, or early 20th century. Everything I get from the fixed stars, I have books on the fixed stars that I will go to if I have to. But this website, Constellation of Words, it quotes a lot of the big important books and really allows you to understand the mythology of a star or its constellation or its constellation. So when you pull up this site, she's quoting Allen, and they talk about here, it's the poisonous dragon in the translation, right? This dragon is poisonous. And there was some foundation, the traditional belief of early astrologers, that when a comet was here near this fixed star, poison was scattered over the world. And when I read that, I was like, oh, wow. It's so perfect for what the news that just came out last week, and I'm sure it'll be increasing. I just was on Twitter earlier, and it's like, new countries have found this new, variant. And so there's this scattering that's happening right now of this, poison, let's say. But themes of health security, all of that are drawn up here by the Draco symbolism in mythology, and it fits precisely with the only story that I'm seeing covered right now, or one of the big stories in the mainstream, and certainly the big story of the last 2 years. And so it's just shocking when I saw this. Here, Al-Wade in Arabic means who is to be destroyed. But this was the other key thing, and this is the final thing I'm going to end here with. Pluto, the dwarf planet of, the underworld, effectively, was conjoined this star, Al-Wade, on 9/11/2001. Pluto was right at 12 in the 13th degree of Sagittarius, close to Al-Wade, within a degree. I pulled up the chart to check. And so we're dealing with the heavy plutonic forces of reality that Draco itself and this star itself would symbolize, right? But we're calling back that 9/11 chart and the Pluto placement in that chart with the eclipse right on that same degree near this same star, as a time when we have this really plutonic upheaval reemerging. So all I want to say to conclude here is that, that decan, the moon's decan, the middle decan of Sagittarius, strength, as Crowley names it, concentration, in the deck I've made, that image in Rider-Waite-Smith of staying strong. I think we might need to be calling on some inner wellspring of strength here as we get into the finals period of 2021, as the chaos in the world kind of grows and gets unleashed here. Stay strong out there. Stay strong. I know this is a little bit of a serious end here, but I have to just share honestly with what I see in the symbols here. That's what I try to do every week. So stay strong, stay, in your power and, in your just, wisdom and spiritual wisdom as you move through this moment. Okay, that's the weekly astrology. That's now time. Now it's time to shift to the weekly tarot. Let me pull this quick card. Let's do this kind of quick. I think I've gone on a little long, but let's just do this here. Boom. This card is, and let me find it here, and let me place it on the PowerPoint presentation. So we're dealing with, I was going to say, what if it's the 9 of clubs? It's not. It's the Page of Spades. The Page of Spades. So I, as a reader, when I see pages, on the one hand, it's like caution, cards of caution. It's like, you don't know what's going on, you don't know what you're doing, you need to calm down and wait and kind of not get too excited. Build skills first. That it can be the warning of the page, but the opportunity of the pages is that there's so much room to grow. There's so much to move into. that it's just a beginning that's been made. And this is the page of spades, or the page of swords, the air element. And I think this relates to what I was saying at the beginning of this talk, that Jupiter and Saturn just made that conjunction in the air sign Aquarius. We're just entering into the early innings of a 20-year cycle. And so I think this is the kind of warning and opportunity that we're early in what reality has emerged in this third decade of the 21st century. This is your reality. This is my reality. And now we're in the early innings of this, third and fourth decade, and what the narratives and the changes in the world that will be brought about. And so it's just the long game. I had a tweet this week about the long game of Saturn and how it implies a long game. And I think this is telling us too, it's a long game here. So settle in, have some strength this week, and use the kind of idea that this is going to be a longer process to support the decisions you're making and undergird the ideas that are coming to you in Mercury Cazimi week as you move into 2022. So that is the weekly astrology. That is the weekly tarot. This is S.J. Anderson. Thank you for being here, and thank you for coming to my channel. You can support me by liking this video or subscribing to the channel. You can always go to my website, sjanderson144.com, and schedule an astrology reading, or you can support my Patreon. Helps keep these videos going. Have an awesome day. Talk soon.